The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, see everything we do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. We have a real treat for you today. Each day we're giving you videos to help you grow as an artist. Today is no exception. As a matter of fact, today we have a brand new video just released today from Lyn Boyer. It includes music by Dave Curley and it's called No Fear Oil Painting. Enjoy it.
As I watch the tide flow in the creek, Lyn Boyer days I stood and played upon.
Hi, I'm Lyn Boyer. Welcome to No Fear Oil Painting and Creative Brush Handling. Today we're going to teach you what I think is a missing building block for your painting. There's a lot of great teaching on mixing color and composing your canvas, but we forget that there's something very important in between. It's what we do with our tools and how we understand our tools and how we get from here to here. I'm here with my friend Dave. We've planned some very special exercises for you using music and sound to help translate brush handling and creative mark making to give energy to your paintings. Dave has joined me on the set. And we're going to start with a look at the painting, The Muse. We're then going to go on later to a full demonstration of a painting called The Froggers, where you can follow along from beginning to end and watch how these brush strokes and marks are made. Dave has also created some beautiful music for that painting that you can use later on as an inspiration to try some of these things. What I would like to talk about specifically here on this painting, we're both going to have a discussion, is intent. As painters, one of the most important things is to approach a creation with a very specific intent. I developed this painting actually over many years in my mind, and when it came to doing it, I knew what I wanted to communicate. The purpose of this video is to help give you the tools to communicate your intent. We can have all the intent in the world, but if we don't have the skill set, it's a wee bit, I can't just tell you don't have fear. That would be like taking you on the top of a mountain to a triple black diamond ski run and saying, have no fear, and pushing you off. You're gonna hurt yourself. And same with the painting. I can say, people can go, I'll have no fear, I'll be expressive. If you take the time to slowly build your skill set, then you can approach the painting, communicate what you want to the viewer. We want to complete the circle so that the viewer, without a written explanation or you guiding them through it, can understand. Maybe not, they couldn't express it in words, but they will understand emotionally your intent. They'll get the feeling from the painting. They'll also have a tour of the painting. In other words, you've led their eye through the painting at different speeds and to a point you want them to linger, etc. I actually like to recall the time I showed Dave the painting for the first time, and I stood back quietly to see how successful or not I was. In other words, without me saying anything, what Dave saw in the painting. So always be aware that you're going to have a viewer. Someone said to me once, this is really wonderful, they said, Lyn, whenever you're painting, just realize you're painting this for someone. And it's a really nice thought, because to me is really half the creation. It would be very much like, I believe, a musician playing in the closet in the dark all his life, or developing his skills, stepping onto stage, and sharing with the audience and completing that creative process. And we want to do the same thing. I would like, actually, Dave, if you would, to share a little bit of the memory of when you walked into the room, and talk your way a little bit through what you saw in the painting.
Yeah, well, for me, this was my first time ever modeling for a painting, so it was a new experience for me to see myself depicted in this. But my first reaction was that, had this been a still photo or a live shot of me, I might have found it a little bit uncomfortable just to look at myself. Like with any photo or video, you kind of start nitpicking. But my first reaction was, this felt very comfortable to view, because it represented me, but it had so much more going on. So that was my initial reaction, was that I felt comfortable, which I wasn't expecting to be. I thought I was going to feel differently about it. And then the first thing in terms of what I witnessed was just, there was so much structure and then movement within it. And that just, I felt like I was moving around the painting, settling on little parts that kind of held my attention, I suppose, and then would move around again. And it took some time, even though I was seeing the whole thing at once. I felt like I was being brought on a little journey throughout the painting. And yeah, I think that was my first response, was just to try and move through all the elements that were there.
Yeah, thank you. And I was pleased. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And so it's very nice when you get, and you won't always get feedback. You'll sell a painting and, the gallery will call and say, it's gone. And you never will actually, it's rare that I would get to hear from the model, the buyer, the viewer, their journey. And so it was a really nice moment for me to go, these things I was seeing, my intent was coming back off the canvas, and that's what we want. We want to pour our energy and our intent, our emotions, our plan, and that's why these exercises, it's like, how can you pour something onto a canvas if you're like this? Let's say you have a dog, it greets you, when you come home. You wouldn't go, I really like you too, No, you get in there and you go, I like you too, you're great, So a lot of it has to do with the energy, the caring, the intent, the love we pour into a painting, and the strokes and the colors and everything. Then hopefully that's going to actually come back off that canvas in some way to attract the person. And also it will linger. I have a painting I bought many years ago that I saw it, and I approached the artist and I went, I just must have this painting. It's still on my wall, and I've always put it where I could walk back and forth 10 times a day, and it has never lost that for me. It hasn't even diminished. It's the same as the first time I saw it. And I think that's remarkable. I have seen paintings that at first I'm really impressed. I go, whoa. In other words, it's impressive on some level, or wow, it's so detailed, or perhaps I'm being impressed with a technical ability, but then it doesn't linger. I don't know musically if there's something that will blow your hair back, but later you kind of go, yeah, but it doesn't linger. There may be a musical parallel. And what I think as a painter I'm after is that the feeling or the intent of the canvas would indeed linger and have staying power, so that as it lives its life, however long that might be, that it continues on its way and keeps doing that for viewers and people that may come in contact with it. Before we move on to actually talking about the mark-making tools and how to use them, I want to use the Muse to point out some of these brush strokes and marks. It will be available to you on the DVD so that you can actually open it up, get in close, look at them, try to emulate some of them, along with many other paintings that you can use in the same way. If you move around this canvas, you'll see that for a focal point, we have actually some little passages in here that were done fairly specifically and carefully to draw your eye to the focal point. But I have not put detail. If you come in close, it's really still very loose. I didn't want you to get trapped here. I didn't want you to fall into this and then get sucked into just looking at a portrait, but rather I bring the eye and then I come up and I have some very thin passages. You'll see dry brush passages. You'll see passages where I've loaded the brush heavily and made a mark. I will have very transparent dark passages over here. And then I'll have come in and put some specificity in and really loaded my brush in the darks, which actually is quite unusual. Normally the darks stay very, very thin, but for this one, I wanted to not only lead you around the canvas, but I wanted to push you into the canvas and bring you back out, a third dimension. It's a very two-dimensional design, but through texture and opacity, you can still carve that third dimension through how much opacity you have and how you load the brush or lay down texture. So I won't go through all of these because you'll be seeing some of them in my demo, but do notice the variety of strokes. Paint is put on. I will then pick things up. I will actually, I put a lot of paint on and I take a lot of paint off. And I'll teach you how to not be attached to that stroke that you go, that's the best stroke I ever did in my whole life. And though it doesn't serve the painting, you're really tempted to leave it there because it's beautiful. And you'll get very used to just going, doesn't serve the painting, I'm going to take it off. And it won't be long till you realize that that's part of your skill set. And you will be able to do that again, but in the right place at the right time where it'll serve the painting. And this is part of the freedom of No Fear oil painting, where you literally can just keep experimenting, pulling paint off, moving it around until you get to first the feeling that you want. You go, nothing is jumping out at you. In other words, there's nothing egregious where you go, boy, that's not harmonious. And then once you get to that point where emotionally it's harmonious, then you can start and be a little analytical where you step back and assess and you adjudicate and pretend you're the viewer and see if there's some place where you're getting stuck or maybe another stroke might help. I'll show you in this painting. There were, and also when you're working this way, really, you'll notice things later. In other words, you'll be balancing paint or reaching down and putting pigment on and go, oh, there's this much blue down here, and while it's on my brush, I want the painting to be able to have a conversation with itself. So I've got this blue on here, and I come up here and find a nice little spot design-wise. I'm always thinking design, design, design. I forget that it's a portrait of a musician. It's just now it's becoming these shapes and this movement and this design. I've got blue, I'll put blue up here. I'll scrape back in, I'll push something this way. And then once you're doing this and you really get going, you'll just get in there and you've got the structure, and then you'll really start just kind of getting after it. And the really nice part about painting this way is that it becomes, you'll have these moments, you will have to be analytical for your intent and the structure, but after that, you'll be painting very intuitively, and your tools will become intuitively. That's really what this is about. It's like driving a car when we all learned how to drive a car and it was awkward and we're stomping on the brake and it's very jerky. now you don't even think about it. You just get in the car. And that's the same thing we're going to do here, is so that those tools can just become absolutely intuitive. And then the really wonderful reward of doing this work and learning to paint this way is that when you'll actually really get to enjoy a moment in your own paintings, because there are things that will happen that you won't see, you won't have planned. And you'll step back, and if it's something that didn't work, then you pick something up and you remove it. But there were things in this painting that I just, in the fray of it all, were created, that I was able to step back and go, oh, I didn't even see that. This thing that was happening, or the light, or this red that was going through the painting, and then brought you down to the reflection, which is my intent was the creative process. Where do your ideas come from, Dave? Perhaps sometimes you just go, I have no idea where that came from, but it's really cool, And so that was the message of the painting, is where is that place? I don't know that I have the answer, that kind of idea comes from, and the emotional moment that may happen, and that an idea, a man, and a beautiful musical instrument that another artist has created all come together in a moment to create another thing. And for us as artists, we have our canvas, our paint, our intent, our idea, and that moment of creativity. And we're trying to bring all that together to actually bring another thing to life that on some level has its own life, that once we release it into the world, it can go on and live its life and give a gift to other people. I now want to talk about the tools themselves. Often, when we were growing up, we were given maybe a crayon or a pencil, simple tools, and because of that, we were holding it, short little thing like this, and perhaps we were at a table. And so all our life, perhaps from laying on the floor when we were a child, we have been inadvertently taught to hold a tool like this and also collapse our body, because we were concentrating, we were trying to draw the pumpkin or whatever. And so we have an intuitive habit of collapsing inward and getting up close and painting with our hand. We have these long-handled brushes on purpose, and I've brought a selection for you here. I'm going to step through what their uses are, and why I want you to look at all of them in concert is because spending a lot of time learning to mix paint, I've drawn the outline of something I want to paint, which in fact I don't do. I'll show you in the demo a different way to do that I think you're going to like. Then we help paint the wall of our living room, and we have the roller. So mentally we can think, well, this thing here is basically just to get this stuff here up onto this here to make the spots the right color. And so much of the energy, the lyricism, and the expression, the calligraphy actually happens right here. So the first thing I'm going to have you try is holding your brushes, and for some of you it may be an entirely new way, and it could feel awkward at first, but as time goes on, I think you're going to really come to enjoy it. I always paint standing up, always. A couple times when I have been so tired at an event and thought, I just have to sit down, I thought, here's the result, at least for me, is I'm sitting down, I'm hunched over my painting, I was painting away, never getting back, so I'm looking at it from this far away, thinking I'm doing a spectacular job, and I was really proud of myself. I'm painting some friends, and I was kind of excited for them to see it. They were painting down on a cliff a bit away. I stood up, walked back, and it was awful. There's no structure. Everything I thought that was wonderful just collapsed. So this is what I would suggest. Now, it's possible that it's physically, you need to sit down to paint. And that's okay. If you have to sit down to paint, do that. But I would suggest, if at all possible, here's a little trick, is when you're in the zone painting, time can pass and you don't realize how much time has passed. So have a little timer, set a little alarm for, I would say, 10 minutes, that short of a time. And have a little chime go off so that at 10 minutes, stand up, step back about 10 feet, assess, and then go back to your chair and begin painting again. Without that, you're going to be undoing a lot of things that aren't working, and you didn't realize when you were up close to your painting that it wasn't working. First thing is, and I think I'm going to turn over here so that you can see what I'm doing. What I'd like you to do is put your hand out, right or left, thumb out, spread your fingers. Pick up your long-handled brush, lay it across your hand so that the brush is just touching the first joint of your index finger. Then I want you to slide that brush as far as you can so that with your finger spread, that little finger can just control it. Then bring your thumb in. Sounds very complicated, but it'll become intuitive. Fold your thumb in so that's just stabilizing the brush. So that basically what I've just accomplished for you is that the control, you can actually roll that brush between your index finger and your thumb. And then you can control it. You've got a third point of control right here with your little finger. So that what's happened, you're not just painting a wall in your living room now, you're going to take full advantage of whatever that brush has to give you. You may be able to get a very thin line or a very wide line, or I'm going to show you how to change that while you're making the stroke. So here's the thing. If that I'd like you to do, even while you're sitting on watching television at night or watching a movie, is if any of you have taken violin lessons, there's a exercise you'll recognize where you just sit in front of the TV with your bow until it's almost fallen out of your hand and you can control it like this, just flinging it around. Occasionally, actually in the studio, my brush will sometimes fly out of my hand. I call it brush poltergeist. It's very surprising. You go, whoa, but you almost should be dropping the thing. That's how, and that's going to give you nuance. In other words, you're not, anytime we got a grip on anything in life, you can't get nuance. And so try that, in other words, till you get real comfortable with just flinging your brush around, twisting it between your forefinger and your thumb, giving it different motions with your little finger. So just nice and loose. So that's how I'd like you to try holding your brush, and that goes for pretty much all of them. I'm now going to step you through the 3 different types of brushes, so you'll be familiar with them, and then after that, the 3 different ways to control the stroke on those 3 different brushes. And if you think about it, we have 3 types of brushes, 3 ways to control it, and if we do 10 speeds within the speed section, if someone's really good with math, we can figure out really the almost infinite iterations that we can get out of these brushes to create the marks that we want to, whether they be soft, medium, hard, aggressive, very delicate, lyrical, calligraphic, powerful, and you just saw, I mean, those are all very emotive words, and that's what we're trying to do with our brushes and paint. Now we're going to talk about the 3 different types of brushes. We have soft brushes, medium brushes, and stiffer or more aggressive brushes. And when I say brushes, I also mean tools. A brush can be a stick or a rock or a feather or anything you find in your studio. It's something to make a mark. All right, I'm just going to say brushes. First, I'm going to quickly show you some of the soft tools, brushes, that you might use. They're made of specific materials, and you actually can pick up a brush and feel it. It's very flexible. It won't hold as much paint. It won't load up as much paint. And as you bring the stroke down, it'll lose the paint faster. So I have a particularly soft fan brush here. This is one of my absolute favorites. It's very calligraphic. It's called an evergreen dagger. That I actually painted a whole painting just with that. I never put it down because it was just making beautiful marks. Then here's a little bit stiffer fan brush. So even within the soft, medium, large, you're going to find differences, but really pay attention to that. They're going to make different marks for you. Also, the length of the bristles is really important. Long, flexible bristles will give you a different calligraphic mark than a short brush. Cat's tongue. This is a very soft brush. You'll find that there are some of the sables that you can't get anymore, but they make very good replicas. Just feel the bristles, and you can go that. I can make a very soft. You would use these often for thinner paint. And then again, I'm just going to go like that, and I know what category it's in. And then something like this. Feather, anything you pick up that can make a mark. I took this and pulled the, it's a turkey feather. Those, and I looked at that and went, oh, look at the beautiful way these are spaced. I think I'll try that. And with some very thin paint, I make a mark with that. The medium brushes, which are, these are basically, these are the workhorses. These are the brushes that I use probably for 75–80% of the painting. In other words, they're the core, they're the workhorses. I do most of the painting. The other two ends are the accents, the things I use to either give it some punch or give it some delicacy. But you need these to paint right down the center for the structure. So these are my structural brushes. I use, these are actually made for oil paint. They're rosemary ivories, and they're a great brush. Like I said, absolute workhorse. I get them in different sizes. I use the long bristle, long handles. They also have an extra long. That's the extra long. And pay attention to that too, whether it's a short bristle, a long bristle, or an extra long bristle. They're going to make a different mark, and the paint is going to come off them differently. You may notice that I also laid down this one. And you may have thought, well, she needs to throw that one out. That looks like a mess and is all used up. I keep these on purpose. They're very important. There are times, a lot of times, I want to use a brush after it has, looks like it's lived most of its life. I'll lay in a passage, and with all those little hairs or the extra things, it will create some intuitive, nice things where you're actually building in some interesting and soft edges as you paint, rather than having to go back and trying to invent them. The third category of brushes are what I call, you could say they're harder bristles. I like to actually call them the aggressive set. I mean, that puts you in the mood to understand that this is when perhaps you're going to really get after your painting, and you'll use a stiffer brush, maybe a short bristled stiffer brush where I can actually come in. You'll see me come in and actually use it more like a shovel. I'll scrape at the canvas backwards to what you're used to seeing. So the hog bristles are a much stiffer brush, and they would be a much more aggressive brush. I also will use things like hardware store brushes. You know, go down to the hardware store and pick up some paint brushes that you can lay in a big stroke and come at it. And however you need to use the tool, just use it. You know, you can, don't be precious about them. Like the ivories, there are some really good brushes. They're not hugely expensive. Just use them. Use them up, you can buy a new brush. But if you're getting too precious about maybe I'll hurt that brush, you're gonna start sort of cramping up and not being as intuitive as you might be. Then, yeah, like here's the little guy, this little short-handled hardware store brush. I can just come in and really attack something and get some nice marks. If you look at the Muse later, the painting we talked about, you will see quite a bit of this in there, where I actually came back into the painting and made marks. There are also anything that will scrape, scratch, move paint. Palette knives, metal palette knives. Here's a nice little rubber palette knife. These are called catalysts. They're made of silicone. You can attack and make shapes and scrape painting off or paint off with those. I use, these are sticks for making barbecue, and I'll go in my kitchen and find all kinds of things. And I'll use sticks to scrape or draw or make little marks. If you look at the Muse and you see buttons on the shirt and little markers on the neck of the mandolin, I actually looked around the studio. I found an eraser on the end of a pencil, because I went, if I paint those in, they're gonna look painted in. I just needed an impression so that your brain would get it. And I found this thing, and I just took the end of the eraser and I touched, and with the eraser, I just pulled enough off, and it was just subtle enough that it was there. So search your house. In other words, you can decide the mark you want to make ahead of time in your mind, and then go search for it or build it. I've made tools. I was trying to figure out how to get the sweeping. The stroke had to be, there are a few sweeps in the Muse where they needed to be very fluid, and I knew that if I reached forward and tried to paint them like this, I would lose the fluidity, and I thought, how am I going to do this? So I invented it. I didn't invent it. I found a push pin and some string, you know, and I tied it around the tool I was using, and I stuck the pin in the middle of the painting and tied it to the end of this tool, and I went like that and made the sweep. So point being, you figure out the mark you want to make, then search for the tool that's going to make it, or create the tool that's going to make it. And that will give you freedom. Two of my favorites are, again, catalyst tools, silicone scrapers. This is an 01 and an 06, and I use these a lot at all stages of the painting. Again, this is, if you get too much paint built up, you can take this and just scrape it off and get rid of it, or you can make amazing marks throughout the painting. And I would call these, for using them to paint with, these would be in the aggressive category, where you can get in and really get after it, create negative shapes. I'm going to lay those out for you. Now that we've learned the three types of tools, soft, medium, and stiff bristles, or hard bristles, we're actually going to learn three different ways to use each of those. So I'm going to, for simplicity's sake, pick my favorite soft evergreen dagger, an ivory workhorse brush, and then a very stiff little short bristled brush. And here's the three things to remember. We're not just picking up paint and painting the wall of canvas. This brush has speed once I touch that canvas and start moving the brush. It has variable speed, variable pressure, and you can change the direction of the brush or the pitch of the brush. So what you're doing is every time you make an assessment, decide how you're going to approach the canvas, and the stroke that you're going to lay down that's going to serve the purpose of your intent at that moment, then you actually are going to be doing a pretty marvelous thing with your brain. You've not only chosen the type of brush you want to make the mark, you've mixed your paint, and this isn't about paint mixing. I'll leave that to one of the other people who are doing a great job of teaching it, but you'll mix the paint so that you can load the brush and it will come off the way you want. And I will tell you that the stiffer the paint, the more you might get little gaps as it comes off the brush, so you see a little bit of canvas and you may want that. The thinner the paint, the faster it'll come off your brush, and maybe just tint the canvas. The light will bounce through more like a stained glass window and come back at you. It'll be more even. Now, the speed and pressure also have to do with how fast that paint will come off and how the stroke will look. And we really want the stroke most of the time to have character, not just be like painting a wall, where if I do speed and pressure very evenly, I could get a very even, nice stroke, at which, you know, I could say, wow, I really was consistent, but it might not have a lot of character. So mixing these up and actually changing speed and changing pressure and changing direction will start giving you variety, calligraphy, lyricism, expression in the marks that you're making. So, and again, it's okay at the beginning to actually kind of think this through and be a little awkward about it, and the strokes may even look a little bit awkward. In other words, if you're going, decide ahead of time going, I'm going to make a stroke that goes from slow to really fast. Just the fact that you've analyzed it will by necessity make it a little awkward. That's perfectly fine. Just go ahead and think it through and be awkward at first, and they don't have to be beautiful, but get the feel of the fact that I'm changing all this up. And as it becomes more intuitive, then just start getting after it. Even before it does, you know, just dive in and give it a try and be unattached to the result. It doesn't matter what the strokes look like. Even when I'm doing the demo here, you may have noticed I didn't even put up a white canvas. It's really good. This is something I don't know, it didn't work and I wiped it off. A white canvas can be intimidating. I just put it up because I go, what I do for you here, the process I'm showing you is what's really important. So I'm even unattached to the result, you know? I'm not sure. I'm going to make these different strokes for you. And since every time you pick up a brush, it'll never be quite the same. It'll be a little bit of a surprise because the paint will never be mixed quite the same. So I don't know what's going to end up here, and it really doesn't matter. But I want to give you a pattern for starting to learn how to incorporate all these different things and get as much as you can out of your brushes. The first brush I'm going to demonstrate for you is one of my soft brushes, the Evergreen. And I'm going to lay down a stroke that controls speed. I'll then lay down another that controls pressure. And then we're going to change the direction or pitch. I'll do that for each of the brushes. In the end, we'll simply have 9 strokes on this canvas. I'm then going to have Dave come back and we're going to interpret that through sound. What does that stroke sound like? And this will really help you when you do this simple exercise to keep you from falling too much into the technical. In other words, you can close your eyes a little bit when you do this exercise after I'm done and become unattached to the result on the canvas and more feel what you're going to do. When you hear it in the music, feel it and then get after it. In other words, if you miss the mark on the canvas, doesn't matter where the mark goes. So I'm going to start with the Evergreen, and I've just got a pile of paint down here. It doesn't matter what color. Make it sort of like heavy cream so it'll come off the brush. You might want it a little thinner for these soft brushes. So the first thing I'll do is very not complicated, is I will start the brush stroke. I'll approach my canvas, touch it, start slowly, and then speed up to the bottom, all right? So just go from slow to fast. The second one with the soft brush, I'm going to keep the speed the same, but I'm going to change the pressure. I'll try to touch the canvas as gently or delicately as I can, and then as I draw the stroke down, the thing I'll be changing is pressure. I will increase the pressure and see what happens. I'm not sure exactly. So I approach, touch the canvas. I'm going to try to be very delicate with how I touch it. Bring it down, and then I'm going to start increasing the pressure and see what it does to the stroke. The next thing I'm going to do is we're going to control the direction or pitch of the brush. Now, there's the obvious direction that you lay the stroke. In other words, if I'm going to make a stroke that's a 45-degree angle. On this one, I'm talking about the pitch of the brush. And this comes back to what we learned, to where you roll the brush between your thumb and finger and control it with your little finger. This particularly works when you have a brush that has a wide side, and if I spin it around, it goes to a hairline. That's where you're going to get the most difference when you change the pitch of the brush. So on a brush like this, and some of these brushes I'm going to pick up. The next two, maybe the pitch won't change because of the nature of the brush, or it works better under pressure, or it gives a completely different effect for speed. So this one, I'm going to keep the speed and the pressure consistent. And as I come down, I'm going to slowly roll that brush between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm going to change the pitch of the stroke and see what I can get out of this brush. It's good to do these with all your tools, so you know ahead of time what you can do with that brush. It'll help you know which brush to reach for and pick up. So I'm going to come approach the canvas, assess what I want to do, and I'm going to keep speed and pressure consistent and come down and change the pitch of that brush. All right? And here's the thing, as I'm going to show you one more little thing here, is that, let's say I'd unloaded that brush down there, you actually can get absolute hairlines. Or there's one more thing I want to show you when you change the pitch of a brush, is you can get amazing calligraphic things. So at this stage, be a little bit, when you're doing your exercise, take the moment to maybe be a little more experimental, do a few more strokes on there to see what you might get out of that brush and how lovely they might be. The next brush we're going to do exactly the same thing with are the medium brushes, the workhorse brushes, the thing that we create our structure with. So I've picked my favorites, the Ivory Longs, and this is a nice number 10. I try to always paint with a brush I pick up one size that feels a little bit on the edge, a little bit uncomfortable. I know if I'm super comfortable with the brush, it's probably too small. Better to pick up something too big and learn how to get the nuance out of it. Then it really, you'll start to like it, and it will help keep you from falling into that pickiness or collapsing inward. Because when we're standing to paint, like I've shown you, your body's open, it's fluid, there's nothing cramped in your body, and you can actually paint from the floor up, through your feet, your hips, your shoulders, your arm, and then through to your brush. So this is the workhorse, the medium. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to make 3 more strokes, then we'll do it with the aggressive tool. So I'm going to pick up some paint. I'm not going to be all fussy about it, and people often see me, I'll shovel my paint up. Kind of like a steam shovel, like backwards, just I want to load that brush. I want to get some stuff in that bristles. And also, boy, you know, don't be stingy with the paint. Painting's about paint, and if we're stingy, you're not going to get interesting brush strokes. So again, same exercise. I'm going to come up with my workhorse medium brush, and I'm going to make stroke number 1 is going to be about speed. Stroke number 2 is going to be about pressure, changing the pressure. Stroke number 3 will be about changing, again, the pitch of the brush. And this is a brush that I should be able to get a fair bit of variety out of pitch. Because it's very wide, and then if I turn it sideways, if you take care of this brush, we have a very thin side. You want to utilize all that. So this one is about pitch. I'm going to start on the flat side, bring the stroke down. Again, consistent speed, consistent pressure. All I'm doing is changing the pitch of the brush to see how much vocabulary is in that brush. Again, this is about vocabulary. This is about expanding how many words you have, how much vocabulary you have to paint with. All right, we're going to go on, do exactly the same exercise using the more aggressive or stiffer bristle brushes. And for this one, I've chosen this great little short-haired bristle, very aggressive. I can really get in there. People occasionally see me like this, where I'll come at a canvas backwards with the brush, and this is a time when I will flip a brush around. I mean, most of the time with Nuance, I'm holding a brush the way I told you, but there are times when you grab the brush, however it's going to work for what you need. In other words, a very detailed little thing, you want to put a dot or light accent, you may need to flip it around like a pencil and hold it and approach the canvas and do that thing. That's okay, that's the right time and place. There's a time where I'm going to pick this up on a painting, and I'm not going to be like trying to do this with it. I'm going to grab this, you know, like a baseball bat or however, just grab the tool that reflects what you're trying to do with it. And if this is something where you need real power and aggression, just grab it like that and then go in and go after the stroke in the canvas or pull it. I will also use an aggressive brush like this to take paint off. In other words, I have paint built up, and then I'll come in and I'll just scrape that back with this brush, leaving some of the strokes. It'll take it off unevenly, and if you've built pigment up underneath, you can get like beautiful colors. Little bits of pigment will get trapped in the canvas, and some wonderful surprises happen, you know, where you'll go, wow, that's, you know, I didn't exactly plan that, but it's beautiful. And that's the fun of it. So we're going to do the same thing, these 3 strokes with this aggressive brush. And on this one, I am picking that paint up. I'm digging in. In fact, I'm going to make that a little stiffer here to lay this down. And I really want to load some pigment into this thing, into these bristles. So stiffen it up a little bit. I'm shoveling it up like a steam shovel. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to do 3 strokes, speed, pressure, and pitch or direction. So, speed, load the brush up again. That's a skill in itself that you'll have fun learning, is really how to load the brush with the paint. how thick to make the paint. So next one, pressure. I'm going to assess, step forward, start with a light pressure, consistent pressure, come down, and then really push and see what happens if I really lean into that. Third one, for a big aggressive brush like this, broach, touch the canvas, consistent speed, consistent pressure, but I am going to, as I come down, change the pitch of that brush. So you see that these strokes are radically different. I did speed, I did pressure, and I did pitch on every one of these, yet they're radically different, and it was because of the tool that I picked up. So this was very simple demonstration. It shows you that depending on the combination of these, because I could have combined brush and changed the speed and the pressure while throwing in a little pitch. So you just have an infinite amount of expression that you can inject. And so after you actually do this exercise, then I would encourage you to do exercises where you then go, I'm going to use speed plus pressure. Now I'm going to use the stiff brush, and I'm going to use pitch and speed, and mix these all up and just do. I have stacks and stacks of canvases where I'm trying this stuff, and I keep them and let them dry, and I have them in a stack, and I'll flip through and I'll go, oh man, that really worked out nice. I think I'll do that. So you can actually build yourself a really nice reference library as you experiment with all of this. Next thing we're going to do now is we're going to have Dave come back to the set, and he's going to help us interpret these with sound. And this will be particularly good for you as you do the exercises. I want you to not just be doing mechanically these exercises, but focus on learning to hear. And then as you hear, translate that back into what would that sound look like. I hear him increasing the volume. I hear him increasing the speed. And let that inspire your brush stroke as you do that. I'd like to welcome Dave back, and I'm now going to just step through slowly one more time what each of these strokes does, how it was created, and then we'll go on and incorporate sound. The first one is the soft brush with change of speed. Next is the soft brush, change of pressure. Soft brush, change of pitch, playing with the calligraphy as you change the pitch. Middle one, your medium brush, change of speed, change of pressure, change of pitch. Aggressive brush, change of speed, change of pressure, change of pitch. Now Dave's going to interpret this for you musically so that you can use this as an exercise. Dave?
Sure. I'm going to switch to my medium for a different tone. lastly, for the heaviest of my brushes. So I'm going to speak about this instrument I have here, which is the bodhrán. It's an Irish traditional instrument. And we chose this because we talked about different instruments that might be able to showcase the connections between the drum and music in general with Lyn's painting. And it almost looks like a canvas. And we also have many utensils that we use as percussionists to make different tones and sounds. So we thought it might make for a good parallel between. And what I want to talk about is the starting off with a simple pattern that you can then push and pull and manipulate into many different tones and textures and rhythms. Even just in terms of language, it seems like there's a lot of crossover musically with painting and artistic visuals that you use. So I want to showcase that taking one simple idea, you can create all these different textures, rhythms, pulses, speeds, dynamic, range, all of these things that Lyn has been speaking about and showcased with her demonstration there. We can take something similar on the drum here, and it might offer a audio version for you. So I'm just going to start off with 4 simple beats that are very even, and then from there we'll develop out into more complex patterns with the same 4 beats. So these all have the same value, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now by just adding some pressure, more dynamic, you can change the complexion of those 4 beats. Okay, so just by putting extra weight, more pressure onto any of those beats, it changes the feel and how you interpret those same 4 beats that are happening, almost like a metronome. They're sticking to their playing, but we're changing the feel and texture and how the listener receives that information. So then from outside of that, we can expand into patterns that have longer sections. So we're going to take those 4 beats and we're going to expand on them, make more complex patterns, and also having patterns that last for longer periods of time or very short recurring patterns. So here we go. Okay, so all of those different patterns that might sound very different from each other are all using the same 4 beats, just dressed up or presented in a different way. And the last thing that I suppose is a very strong parallel is the use of negative space. I would never have called it that until starting to work with Lyn. We say in music that it's important what you play, but it's also very important about what you don't play or choose not to play. And it's the same thing for creating negative space in your paintings. So taking those 4 beats that we have, as we start to omit certain beats, again, we'll create different patterns, different textures that will sound different, but still occupying the same space, using the same tool throughout all of that. So here's just taking those 4 beats and creating some negative space. Okay, so hopefully that gave you some audio stimulation to transfer onto your canvas.
Dave and I are now going to do a short demo for you, just to give you some ideas of how you might use music and sound to try all these brush strokes. In fact, what I would encourage you to do is actually play this and use this audio for yourself to try your own experiments. We haven't fully rehearsed this. I'm going to be making decisions on the fly because in my mind, I want to experiment and respond to what Dave's doing. I don't want to be overthinking and like, I'm going to paint a portrait of Dave, but more just allowing myself to be very responsive, which also, full disclosure, means I have no idea what this is going to end up like. It could be an enormous visual mess, and that's absolutely okay. And I give you permission. And maybe if mine is a mess, then you'll go, well, gee, mine can be a mess too, and it'll take some of that concern, some concern out of it for you. And you can just approach this as a grand, really fun experiment of getting after a canvas and mixing paint. So we're going to do this. I'm going to spend a little minute mixing up, doesn't matter, just kind of a neutral color to assess. You'll see me thinking while I'm doing this part of, I'll look at Dave. I'm actually going to use Dave as a little bit of a visual inspiration. You'll see me glancing over just to get some gestures or shapes so I can be respond. I have something besides the sound, something visual, also angles, shapes, gestures to respond to. So I'll be responding to the sound, and I'll also be responding to the visual of Dave sitting there with the barn. So anyway, be patient. Dave's going to start just playing for you a little bit, and then when I give him a signal, he will start playing through a progression that will emulate soft, medium, and then getting a little more powerful, aggressive, and expressive towards the end. And I'm just going to then be getting after it, and we're going to maybe do about 10 or 12 minutes for you, and then you can have at it yourself. I'm going to add one little tip. It's something I like to do. You'll actually see a lot of painters do it, plein air painters and studio painters. But I like to actually, I keep one paper towel folded up in my hand, and you'll see me habitually reach down, and before I put that, if I reach into the odorless mineral spirit, I won't even know I'm doing it, but I reach over and I get some of that out so things don't turn to soup, and I'll use this to wipe. But it's just very convenient, and though it's not elegant to be walking around with this under your arm, since it's so convenient and I can reach down and get a sheet of this when I need it, you'll find that it helps so you don't disrupt your continuity by maybe leaning down and trying to get a paper towel off or whatever other gizmo you have, which can be really awkward. It's very fast, it's nice, and it's gotten so comfortable that if I don't have it, I'm at a loss. I'll find I'm putting my arm behind my back, so it's actually it looks uncomfortable, it's not. So that's a little tip that you can try if you don't already. It's very common. So now I'm going to start assessing, making some marks. Dave will begin playing. When I give him a little signal, he will then start playing through the progression. I will just respond and see what ends up on the canvas. Okay, see if you get really getting into this, you fall over at the end. Anyway, that you saw that I would glance at Dave just for a gesture or deciding what direction to make a stroke or a gesture, or I saw a movement down here with his hand, and I swang, and I saw a light spot here and laid a stroke in. And more than that, what I was really doing was I was just absorbing the sound more than anything else, and the rhythm, the pulse, the intervals, and that would just, I would go down and I would dig in and respond to, obviously I wasn't picking up the cadmium red and cad yellow when he was doing these soft sounds at the beginning, or slow movements, something that had, you're painting the ocean waves or something like that. But when he started with the aggressiveness in the pulse, then it was just natural for me to look down and dig into the brighter colors that would interpret that, and reach over and pick up one of these really aggressive tools and just come in and start hitting that canvas. I mean, really, on something like this, to get the feel of what it's like to come at a canvas, or not worry about the fact that, oh, that was hair, what is she doing, or that doesn't look like whatever. And feel what those tools feel like, so that you can incorporate that. And then even after you're done, I mean, there's nothing going on, but I'm just starting to go, oh, what? Oh, look, as I pull that off, because I'm unattached to this thing, as I pull, I want you to look at this. As I come back and I pull that off, all that stuff I did underneath is going to leave little bits of pigment there in the fibers, and you're going to get all this texture and complexity going on. And that's what you build on. In other words, I could take this and go, oh, this is, or like, I love some of this. I'm going to use this as a foundation maybe for something else. And so, again, the thing I want you to do also at the end is, after the music stops, is don't be attached to it. Come back in and start moving those colors around. Wipe it off, do it again, wipe it off, do it again. So, thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
And I hope that you enjoyed this, and this gave you permission to just get after it. Have fun with your brushes. Coming up next, I'll be doing a full demonstration of a painting called The Froggers. Dave has composed some beautiful music and a really wonderful song to express the painting. I think you'll enjoy that. It'll also be instructive. I'll be doing it from beginning to end with a lot of explanation, and I'll expand on some of this as you see the painting come to fruition. So that's coming up next. I'll enjoy doing it for you, and thanks for being with us for this part. Hi, this is Lyn Boyer, and welcome to my video. What I'd like to share with you in this video, which I'm very excited about, is a specific skill, brush handling. To bring expression and energy to your paintings, we're going to talk about materials, brushes, mark making tools, and also how to use them and adapt them to whatever your particular style is. I also have my friend Dave with me, who's going to be bringing you some wonderful music and also helping to bring you some exercises that we believe will help if you have gotten stuck. I know we all have, and so these will get you around those roadblocks and help get you going again and hear and see in a different way. What's unique about my video is I'm not trying to teach you to paint a thing. or a scene or even in a particular style. I'm really getting down to core skills that you can adapt and use for whatever direction or artistic voice you have planned for yourself or want to develop further. The other really unique thing is something I found to help me, which is using sound to help understand the visual and bringing these two worlds together using concepts from music and from painting, bringing them together, creating exercises for you that also I think you'll find really enjoyable, and the music is just beautiful to listen to help move you forward in a new way. I developed it actually, discovered it. It was something that helped me, and I started bringing it to my workshops and saw it really functioning for students and got very excited about it and wanted to be able to bring it to you, the wider audience, in this way. So I hope you'll join me on this artistic journey to No Fear oil painting.
Well, that is Lyn Boyer with music by Dave Curley and No Fear oil painting. You can learn more about that video at lilyartvideo.com. And if you go to the comments section right now, you can find a discount code in there. Also, we've got a great interview with Lyn. We'll get to that right now.
Dave and I actually first met at an Irish festival that I helped plan a number of years ago, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. And I had, I'm a painter and had also an interest in music, and I wanted to bring the two worlds together and had always kind of had my antenna up to find someone to collaborate with. And Dave and I became friends.
Yeah, I suppose on my end of things, it was seeing Lyn's paintings and looking for other creative outlets to use my music and collaborate and bring maybe my music and my musical outlook to a new medium, and that's kind of where the oil painting for me kind of came on board.
Yeah, and I think the genesis of it, I was driving you to the airport and I found out that he also had the same interest, and so I grabbed him.
Yeah.
You know, and we got this started and didn't quite know exactly the form it was going to take. But beyond that, other than knowing we had a common interest, I had a moment as a painter that, and an instructor, as an educator, where I was having trouble. I'd see people get stuck, and I'd try everything I could to move them forward as a painter in my classes, and I was seeing that with some people, you know, everything I did, it wasn't getting through. So I was out painting in Durango by the Animas River, a beautiful river, and I was trying to paint moving water. And as a painter, I'm sure this will resonate with you in the sense that you're out there, you're inspired, it's beautiful, you're painting away, and there I was. And what I was putting on the canvas absolutely wasn't communicating what I was seeing. And I'd pick and pet at it and pick some more, and I'd stare. And it was, I had this moving water, and my painting was just falling flat. It was kind of bleeding out on the sidewalk. And then I realized, I go, I'm using only one sense that I'm surrounded with. And I closed my eyes and I thought, what other senses can I use? And in other words, there's the air and there's the warmth of the sun, and then sound. You know, I absolutely focused. I closed my eyes and I focused on the sound until I could actually hear the movement of the water. And once I got that, I only half opened my eyes and kind of aimed at the canvas. I got my brush loaded, knowing that if I really looked at the canvas, I'd fall back in that other way of thinking, and got that sense of the sound and stepped forward, laid the strokes down, left it, and then it had the sense of what was going on. And that's when I realized that we're missing a lot. In other words, just by copying what something looks like. And so I thought, if that worked for me, I think I could incorporate that into teaching and guiding people. And so Dave and I talked, and I actually started teaching using Dave's music. And then when this opportunity came along, we decided to incorporate this, and really the genesis is to help people move forward using not only the visual art forms but sound.
Yeah, I suppose for me on the music front, I'm always looking for other influences that I can draw on. So for me, a jumping off point can sometimes just be a word that might be the genesis of a song that just sticks in the brain, and then I kind of try and write from that place. But having a visual stimulus or looking at a painting and trying to either evoke something musically or lyrically that I see, or just to try and take the essence of something and bring it forward and turn it into a piece of music. So I was kind of encouraged by that, even just as an artistic format that I would delve into and try and see, can I use this as a way to create something new? So that's for me where the interest lay. And then once I saw Lyn's art, I was just blown away. So I wanted to take some more of that into my life. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, what Dave and I are doing is a bit different than what people assume. Painting to music or putting music on in your studio to get in the mood, or some people dance to music to think, they think that's going to bring more energy, and perhaps it does. But we're doing an entirely different thing where we're actually, between the two of us, going to teach you to train your ear to become, would this be right, a more sophisticated listener. Dave is a musician, and so he can, he'll be a little more cogent about explaining some of these things. But as a visual artist, I'm training you to see. You actually have to see in order to paint. What the brain doesn't have reference for, it can't see and it can't paint. That's why you'll, 5 years from now, you'll look back and go, wow, I didn't even see that back then. And I think, I know actually Dave also teaches me music. And one of the big things I've noticed, Dave's teaching me is helping me teach you better, in the sense that I'm learning to hear. Mm-hmm. And there are things now that I can hear that I couldn't before. And so what'll happen, I'm going to explain this real quickly, is over time, your brain starts making more and more symbols. In other words, you're training yourself to become a painter, and without realizing it, you start coming up with formulas, little defaults, and these will become go-tos. And you actually stop looking, you stop seeing, you stop having beginner's mind, and what you're actually painting are all these little symbols. And then you wonder why you're stuck and you can't move forward. So by learning to listen and hear sound, Dave and I are going to do some specific exercises for you. Then this is all fresh, so your brain will know how to handle it. And then once we trick you into doing this, then we get you back into the visual, and you'll have like fresh eyes.
Yeah, I suppose for me, once we started discussing how this might shape up as a format, realized how many parallels there are, even just in the language. So in music, we talk about textures, rhythms, dynamics, volume, the weight, the speed, the beats per minute, like all of these things relayed back to what you do. And when we do our exercises, anytime we've kind of worked through them, you're responding so quickly to how I change the music, and it represents something different for you each time. There's a little shift in the dynamics. So, but that for me was the first thing I just found fascinating, is just even the language set. Mm-hmm. There's so many similarities between the thought process of creating music, and then what you seem to use for your thought process for creating a painting.
Yeah. And I really agree. They're even closer. I mean, the more deeper we got into this, the closer I realized these two art forms are so close that I really think, in a way, it's basically even on a level of math and physics, exactly the same thing, but we're processing it through two different senses, and presenting the art form and creating that using either sound, the auditory, or the visual. But they're so parallel in a way. I often think through this, I want to kind of create almost try to create synesthesia. Where there's this we break down the boundary between the two, and actually it's been helping my own painting.
Yeah, we even, I guess, another thing, I would never have called it negative space. We often say it's not what you play, it's what you don't play in music. Sometimes the more room you give something, it can accent something. But the minute I heard Lyn speaking of negative space and use of color to create different negative spaces, it just resonated with me that we do the same thing in music. If you have it completely jam-packed, you're going to end up with a different end product than if you create this room and give features to different things. So just those parallels jumped out straight away.
I don't think we've actually, we'll sometimes talk about a painting, we'll stand in front of a painting and talk about it. And when Dave was presenting some ideas that we're going to do for you, I don't think I found an artistic principle where we didn't have a musical parallel.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to talk a little bit about success and failure in this business, and not only in the business. If you're just doing art as a hobby or for pleasure, and this is called No Fear Oil Painting. This is what we're presenting, and I have found no matter what level you're at, there is a voice, at least there's a voice in my head, or was, of I don't really want to try this because it might not be good enough. The painter next to me is going to walk by and I've done it wrong, or there's so many pressures. And first I want to say it's absolutely normal, because we start out in school, we're given a report card, F, you failed. And all through life, we're measured, this is the right way to paint, or this is a wrong note that you've played, or whatever. And what I really, I find people are so fear-filled that then you're paralyzed, rather than just using it as information. And musically, perhaps the same thing, where it's like, what would happen if I tried this color paint, or this shape, or this solution, or this chord, or this lyric with this chord? In other words, if you can, the short form is one of the tools to get past the fear is just say, what would happen if? And you're going to find out an answer. An answer isn't right or wrong. You're going to find out something. You're going to find out what would happen if you tried X. And it may serve you. It may not serve the purpose at the time, but you may stash it and go, I might be able to use that later. And by doing this, it also becomes more of a kind of an exciting, it's like antiquing, a treasure hunt, a treasure hunt of answers. So you can have your own artistic exploration rather than trying to measure yourself. I do believe in measurable progress, because there are basics and you want to learn those, but not in parallel, the foundational things, you learn them in parallel with this experimentation. And musically, the approach.
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit different musically in that we begin creating new music, not typically in like something that will be also immediately going towards a finished product. So we have hundreds of scraps of paper and diaries and notebooks, we jot things down, and I have little musical structures that I've had in my head. I might have them for 15 years that I've been playing these different, chord progressions or melodic ideas that haven't quite found their home yet, and or haven't gotten to a completed point. So those things kind of ferment over a while for me before it would be the equivalent of my first stroke on the canvas. And I suppose, I guess in some ways you'd have that as well.
Yeah.
But we do start the basic origins knowing that it's going to be a while before we sit in the studio or get in front of a crowd and perform that piece. But yeah, the fear element, we have the exact same thing where you're at a festival and you've got other bands that are rolling through your performance, and you have all of those kind of insecurities can bubble up, but you're trying to always persevere and bring your music that you've taken the time to create and bring it to the next stage that you can. So
Yeah. And I think there's a parallel too, that what you described is you described process. In other words, I think that's one of the misconceptions for us, many of us as painters or artists, is that if we get a canvas and we pick up a brush, we are going to paint a painting. That's a painting, and it's going to be judged. And we forget the process. In other words, a painting that we are going to discuss later, Dave modeled for it, was in fact a painting that was probably 10 years in the making. In other words, I had the concept, I had bits and pieces, and what I want you to do as you watch this DVD is to start to learn something that musicians already know, which is really wonderful. Practice versus performance. We are always thinking everything we do is a performance, and it's not. In other words, we peel off and do focus studies, or we should be, And when you peel off and do a focus study, or you do a practice, or Dave sits and practices, maybe a little segment music comes to you, a lick, and practice. It's not a performance, I don't pay to go sit in an auditorium and see Dave sit on the stage and I'm practicing now, So we need, every other art form understands this, and why painting has sort of shifted over to this strange, let's all go paint, and we have to have a painting at the end of the day. That is very stressful, And so I think, in the No Fear oil painting is to say, no, we're going to, I would suggest this. I did this for myself. I went and got boxes. I bought really cheap little canvases, cheapest I could find, because I knew it couldn't be a painting. It wasn't archival. I'd be embarrassed to sell it because it was really cheap canvas. And so there was no way it was going to come home with a painting. And then when I did that, the fun started coming back, the enjoyment and the pleasure, because I took that performance part out. And then when I felt like my skills, I had some new skills together, then I went, in fact, knowing Dave and some other musicians, I actually emulated them, because I would watch them do this. Or when I was on staff at the festival, I'd watch them back there working through a little bit, backstage. I'd walk by and they'd be back in the dressing room, working on a little bit. And I went, why aren't we doing that? And so anyway, I started emulating what all you were doing. And it was really amazing how the fear started vanishing, and the real joy and exploration started returning, because then I could set myself little recitals. I'd go, I'm a little better at these painting skills, and I'd go, okay, Lyn, let's, I don't know, most people, did a little piano or something when they were a kid, and the teacher would go, it's time for the recital, and then you try what you've learned. And I want you to do that at the end of this DVD where, you do it in little chunks and you go, practice what Dave and Lyn have taught. Okay, I think I've got it. Do yourself a little recital, see how you do, and then go back and study some more. But the shift back and forth, I think, would be a real parallel to what you as musicians do.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so when we have the end point in focus, it sometimes can trip you up a long way, because maybe for us we have a CD or an album music we're put together, we know the standard, the caliber of everything else, and if something along the route to completion doesn't feel like it's matching up, you might push it aside, you might scrap it, but it could still be the right thing artistically to persevere with it. So when you have those endpoints, sometimes it can muddy the journey a little bit, and you lose the energy for it. So anything for me musically that I can either clear the space so I can just focus on it to get to that endpoint where you feel, okay, we have a finished product here or a finished piece, and that we can step back from it and say, yeah, it's come to where it needs to be, and then you try and leave it alone.
Yes. Oh, Dave just said something really important. I was counting on him for that. And this is, he just said, and then you leave it alone. I killed many lovely paintings. They literally, I went, Lyn, you've worked really hard. That's quite a nice little painting. And then I'd walk by it and I'd go, and I'd walk in, I'd go, that's not quite perfect. And someone might say something about it, or Aunt Gazelda, she's not going to like that. So I'd go, I'm just going to fix that, And then I'd see something else to fix, and then I'd fix it, and I'd fix it. And it literally would bleed out on the ground, and there was no going back from it. Painting, probably musically, you can fix it, but...
yeah, well, in the live performance scenario, you can, which is one of the nice things about live performance. Those mistakes, as we would feel it as a musician, passes by so quickly for a live audience that it kind of just dissipates quickly. Whereas in the studio, we have that similar thing where we can record, and with digital recording now, we can go in and splice everything to death, basically.
Splice it to death.
And it's a difficult thing to know whether you leave something as the performance of it at the time, or whether you get it to be more metronomic, kind of get all the elements to sit neatly together. And, these processes in recording are not as neat as maybe just everyone playing live. It has a more organic feel. So we have that issue on that end, where we now have the capabilities to go in and correct every element, and that can really squeeze the life out of the music. So to be able to just, on the live performance thing, we record our music, and then it comes to bringing that music from a studio setting to the stage, and probably don't ever really leave the music alone. We're always changing it slightly and updating it for our own interests as well, to keep the music feel fresh. So on that front, we're always teasing the music a little bit. But to know when, that was one of my first questions for you, is how do you say something is done? Because for me, I can look at it and say, aesthetically, it's pleasing, it's beautiful, but how did you decide that last, whatever type of stroke it was the finishing touch, and you step back and you say, it's finished now? It seems, it's just a different discipline, but it seems like a hard thing for me to conceptualize, that you would have that moment and just go, okay, brushes down, we're done. So.
Yeah, and there, the first time Dave asked me that question, there was a very specific answer, and it's a question that artists through the centuries have had. When are you done? And some people say, well, my kid tells me when I'm done, or when the dog's dinner time, it's done. But I found that if there's an error that people are going to make, it's the painting it to death. And that comes from fear. It circles back to fear, insecurity, not trusting that instinct, not trusting yourself. So I've learned more and more to trust my first instinct, trust the painting, and only start going in if I walk by and there's something egregious, in other words, that's just wrong, you know, in other words, truly an error, I will correct it as simply as I can. And then if this is a studio painting we're talking about, you know, I'll leave it for a bit. And if I walk by and give it some time, sometimes I'll walk by the studio and I'll go, oh, and I'll see immediately, and I'll walk forward and I will do, and here's a tip for you. I will do just that and then back away, leave the studio. Because again, you can fall into that, you get in way too close. In other words, all assessment that you're going to do on your painting of whether to fix something that's egregious should be done from about 20 feet. I don't know what it would be like, you know, if you're with a band or your trio, you're having to listen to everything, whereas if you had the sound hole of your guitar up against your ear, things are distorted. If, as a painter, you walk up and address something on your canvas, and then look over here and go, ooh, that looks terrible too. You're making a decision as a painter with incorrect information, because if you're this close to the canvas, when you see that and make a decision, you're not getting all the information. You're not seeing the harmony or the balance of the painting. So what you have to do, leave it and then step back and assess again. And if there's something else, do it.
Yeah, we would have an equivalent where we maybe record, even when rehearsing, we'll do a quick voice memo, we'll record our music, and then we'll instruments down, we'll go make lunch, and then we'll listen back. And basically we come at it with a fresh ear. You're on about approaching your painting with a fresh eye, almost like if this was my first observation of this, what's my impression?
Yeah.
Something's jumping out too much or looks a bit off, you know, and you do that little bit of time away, gives you that fresher perspective. And you mentioned one other word as well that I think is, for music, simplicity can be scary as well. If you do something that's simple, broken down, that it's hard to sign off on that because you think it's easy to just keep adding stuff. And musically, that's the same for me, and I imagine it's the same for painting. It is, yeah. It's hard to just sign off on something that looks or sounds at first hearing simple, because you feel like you should be developing more, you should be adding more stuff, but sometimes that's where it needs to be. Yeah. And you know, leave it alone.
Yeah, and trust your decision and your belief in your decision, because you do. It's like, well, if I'm a little bit insecure about this, if I put in the cat, then it'll be a good painting, because you know it needs a cat. And then you go, and maybe a little vase of flowers. So you're working from insecurity, like trying to dress it up. You know, let's just put some bling and let me put on another necklace, and maybe that'll work. I even, in fact, a good story, the painting that Dave and I are going to discuss, the Muse, that Dave modeled for, I had a very specific vision for that painting, and I was very careful to stop myself. In other words, I really made sure that once it was pretty much there, that I just said, I am going to trust these decisions I made. Because when you're really functioning from your right brain that can process this type of visual information that's mixed with the vision you had for the painting or the song, then I swear there's this little fear voice in us that starts going, maybe it's not good enough. Maybe my concept wasn't good enough. Maybe someone's not going to like that I didn't finish this part. Or, you know, and the thing is, what I want to tell you too is fears are reinforced. I actually have part of this painting. You'll see the painting where I wanted things to just sort of blow out, and you can see canvas because I wanted you to see the strokes, basically painting the music. I was actually painting to some of Dave's music when I painted this painting, and I was going, what does Dave's song look like? In other words, I was going, what does the music look like? And so there are spaces in it, because there were spaces in the music. And I stopped myself in time on the painting. So I was very happy with it. And just recently had someone, and they liked the painting, but I saw them frowning a bit. They were looking down in the lower right-hand corner, and I saw a corner, and a little bit of a frown. And I smiled, because this doesn't bother me anymore, you know? I mean, I have this ferocious belief in my paintings, you know? And I said, you wonder why I didn't finish it, don't you? And they went, yeah, actually I was. Why didn't you finish that, you know? But, however, this will help you. I was standing in a museum looking at a magnificent John Singer Sargent portrait. And there was a couple standing there in front of it. And pretty soon I heard the wife go, Harry, I think the face is pretty good, but the hand is terrible. Why didn't he finish the hand? So that was John Singer Sargent. So turn up the volume. There's certainly valuable critique if you find a good mentor or teacher that matches what you do, that can support you without damaging your own personal vision. And so that kind of critique you want. But the voices in your head, or you can tune them out. I know that Dave and I have really enjoyed doing this, and that we hope it'll lead you into a land of no fear oil painting, where you can experiment and grow and get past those roadblocks that you may have had. And if you'd like to visit more of my work, I'm at lynboyer.com.
Yeah, and if you want to hear any more of my music, it's davecurleymusic.com. And then we also have interplayartist.com.
Yes, and that's the project that we're doing together. That actually was a bit of the genesis of No Fear Oil Painting.
Well, that was Lyn Boyer, and the video is called No Fear Oil Painting. You can get that video at lilyartvideo.com. Remember, we have a special discount for today only in the comments section. I'm on the set of Watercolor Live. We wish you were here. I'm Eric Rhodes. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Lyn Boyer, and welcome to my video. What I'd like to share with you in this video, which I'm very excited about, is a specific skill, brush handling. To bring expression and energy to your paintings, we're going to talk about materials, brushes, mark making tools, and also how to use them and adapt them to whatever your particular style is. I also have my friend Dave with me, who's going to be bringing you some wonderful music and also helping to bring you some exercises that we believe will help if you have gotten stuck. I know we all have, and so these will get you around those roadblocks and help get you going again and hear and see in a different way. What's unique about my video is I'm not trying to teach you to paint a thing or a scene or even in a particular style. I'm really getting down to core skills that you can adapt and use for whatever direction or artistic voice you have planned for yourself or want to develop further. The other really unique thing is something I found to help me, which is using sound to help understand the visual and bringing these two worlds together, using concepts from music and from painting, bringing them together, creating exercises for you that also I think you'll find really enjoyable, and the music is just beautiful to listen to help move you forward in a new way. I developed it actually, discovered it. It was something that helped me, and I started bringing it to my workshops and saw it really functioning for students and got very excited about it and wanted to be able to bring it to you, the wider audience, in this way. So I hope you'll join me on this artistic journey to No Fear oil painting.